Doing this now for 18 days.
Bless your heart.
18 days. We started in Fort Irwin, California, and that was 823 miles ago. So, and in these last almost 3 weeks, we've had a number of runners that have joined us, in multiple days. The same crew has been supporting those runners, and so we've made it here in 18 days, 820 miles, and quite a long journey. You can imagine through every kind of terrain that you can imagine, including the ocean side, as we ran along the Pacific Ocean, for part of the day, which was pretty spectacular. Through some incredible switchback mountains to open deserts to just about everything you could imagine. And we've got a lot more to go, and that's only when we just got getting into Arizona. So we've got the entire rest of the country to go. But we've got 6,100 miles. We've only run 823 of them. So you can imagine the territory we have yet to cover. We're going to be in 19 states. This is only our second state. We're in Arizona for 16 days, 12 days. And this probably is one of the longest states we're going to be in. So it's a long, grueling journey. We're going to meet probably tens of thousands of people as we go. We're going to be rotating runners in every day. And our goal is to make sure that we read every single name of those that gave their lives in the last 18 years. So we started with the USS Cole. October 12, 2000 was our first mile. And every mile after that is a unique date of death. And so we've identified all the dates of death, the actual days, day, month, and year of every one of these heroes. And we've assigned them a mile. And it doesn't matter if one person died on that day, they would be a mile. If 25 people died on that day, they would be at that same mile. We would call their name out loud. Today, unfortunately, I think 2003 is a horrible year, overseas, and we have a lot of names to read tonight, and those names only account for about 2 months.
April 4th through May 23rd.
April 4th through May 23rd. 178 names from April 4th to May 23rd. Of 2003. That's just a month and a half of 1 year. And so all the way to Arlington, we have been laying this trail of dates. And so the earliest dates are obviously going to be on the West Coast. And then we're moving towards, Arlington as we get, earlier and newer dates. And when we end up in Arlington Cemetery on August 5th, we hope to call out the last name that may have died even to that day and make sure that everyone is accounted for. I don't think there's ever been an organized fallen veteran tribute like this ever in this country. To be able to say that we have literally called every single name out loud, regardless of death type. So we're running for anyone who's died while they were serving, or as a result of the service, because we're even running for those that have taken their own lives through PTSD and hidden wounds. So very, very comprehensive. Probably have the most comprehensive database of fallen heroes of anybody, even more than the DoD, because of the way our relationship is with families and through our network. So it's very, very comprehensive. So what we do every day is we run a certain number of miles. Today we ran 46 miles. Every day is different. It ranges between 40 and so far 56, I think, in a day. We're only running at 5 miles an hour, so every 5 miles adds another hour to the end of our day. So we would have run 51 miles, we would have been an hour later. 56 miles, we would have been 2 hours later. So this is one of our earlier nights, actually, because most nights we're ending about 6:30 or so.
We didn't have you out there running today, so we did good.
That's right. And so this is how we're accounting for all of these heroes every single day. And we, at the end of each day, as is our tradition, we like to read the names of all those that we ran for that day. We like to reread them. You know, one of the most important things in remembrance is making sure that your name is heard, that that name is heard. And when it's heard, when it's read, when it's spoken, it actually, to me, sends some kind of spiritual message, but it means that they're not forgotten. And as long as someone continues to read your name out loud, then you truly will never die. And so as an organization, we hope that we will continue to carry on a tradition of calling names out loud so that everyone knows they're not forgotten, but especially their families. So every evening, we take a moment. Sometimes it's a few moments because of the name. Now we've read them every mile all day long, but there's not always anybody there to hear them but us. You understand that? We run that mile, we call those names. We run that mile, we call those names. Sometimes there's someone there, many times there's not. So that's why it's important when we get to a place where we can relax and have a meal and be comforted and be in a safe place, where we, emotionally we can just be ourselves. That we are able to reread those names again so that everybody gets to hear them besides us. And you may be listening to these names for the families themselves, because the families may not have been able to be there when those names were called. We would try to record it along the way, but every family doesn't always even know that we're doing it. So you may be hearing these names for a family that has no idea that we're reading their loved one's name out loud. We have a family here, Smith family, who came all the way from Indiana. They drove all the way from Indiana to hear their son's name being called right here in Florence, right down the road. And we were within, 2 miles when they arrived of calling their son's name out loud. And so they were able to stand there and be with us and hear us call him, as well as others who died that same day. And so we're honored to have them be a part of our family today and your family tonight, as they were able to be here and join for this amazing meal that was prepared for us. And so I'm going to ask the runners that ran today. We lost a couple runners, they had to leave, but those runners that are with us, to read those names. You might want to sit down, stand, whatever you want. It'll take a few minutes to go through these names. But as you listen, I want you to think about the fact that these men and women who we will name out loud have a family. They have a family who cared about them. They have friends who love them. And that sometimes when you read a litany of names, it doesn't sound like it's very important, because they're just names. You don't know them. They may not be familiar to you. But if all of a sudden, in the midst of these 178 names, a name came up that all of a sudden you knew, maybe it's a local hero, maybe it's a neighbor, you know that all of a sudden your heart goes, oh, that name's familiar to me. Like Lori Piestewa, we read her name the other day. It was a mile that we ran for. Everyone's familiar with her story. There are other heroes from Arizona that you may hear and may know their names. But every one of those names should evoke that emotion if every one of those families were in this room. And since they're not, I want you to take that to heart and realize that you are their family right now and that you are listening for them. Sean?
Can I go ask the ones in the bar to come in?
Absolutely. Wait a second. We're about to read the names of 178 service members who gave their life within a month and a half period in 2003. When we're done reading these names, I would like for everyone to think about someone that they might know who gave their life from any generation. It may be a friend, it may be a neighbor, it may be a grandfather. It could be anyone from any generation. If you know of someone who gave their life for our country and you would like to speak their name out loud, I'll give you that opportunity. You don't have to say anything if you don't want. If you know someone you would like to speak their name out loud, we welcome that opportunity for you to mention a buddy or any circumstance of someone that you may know. So I'm going to give you the opportunity after we read our name. Gentlemen.
This is starting April 4th, 2003. Private Aaron Cortezla Devera, U.S. Army. Private Devin DeMello Jones, U.S. Army. Private First Class Wilfred David Russell Bellard, U.S. Army. Specialist Daniel Francis Cunningham, Jr., U.S. Army. First Sergeant Edward Smith, U.S. Marine Corps. Specialist Rachel Ann Marie Lacey, U.S. Army. Sergeant First Class Paul Ray Smith, U.S. Army. Captain Tristan Neal Aiken, U.S. Army. Sergeant Dwayne Roy Rios, U.S. Marine Corps. First Lieutenant Brian Michael McPhelps, U.S. Marine Corps. Corporal Bernard George Gooden, U.S. Marine Corps. Private Viet Nam Tran, U.S. Army. Captain Benjamin Wilson Samus, U.S. Marine Corps. Captain Travis Allen Ford, U.S. Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Irving Stanley Villy, U.S. Army. Specialist Martin Maurice McLemore, U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Michael Stephen Cash, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Stefan Alexander Booker, U.S. Army. Specialist Larry Kenyatta Brown, U.S. Army. Specialist Markel Amos Roberts, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Tobiah John Odom, U.S. Air Force. Sergeant First Class Casey Hamilton Bignon, U.S. Army. Private Kelly Stephen Prewitt, U.S. Army. Private First Class Gregory Paul Hexley, Jr., U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Robert Wesley Bushnell, U.S. Army. Petty Officer Scott. Vernon. Roots, U.S. Navy. Lance Corporal. Andrew Julian Avels, U.S. Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Lincoln Daniel Holland said, U.S. Army. Specialist George Arthur Mitchell Jr., U.S. Army. Specialist George Arthur Mitchell. Oh, I just read that one. Captain Eric Bruce Diaz, U.S. Air Force. Corporal Jesus Martin Antonio Medellin, U.S. Marine Corps. Second Lieutenant Jeffrey Joseph Kaylor, U.S. Army. Major William Randolph Watkins III, U.S. Air Force. Fireman Johnny Hamilton Jr., U.S. Navy. Corporal Henry Levon Brown, U.S. Army. Tech Sergeant Jeffrey Adam Hunt, U.S. Air Force. Sergeant First Class John Winston Marshall, U.S. Army. Private First Class Jason Michael Meyer, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Scott Douglas Sather, U.S. Air Force. Private First Class Juan Guadalupe Garza, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Robert Anthony Seaver, U.S. Army. Sergeant James M. Burrup, U.S. Army National Guard. Staff Sergeant Carrie Mardell Wiley, U.S. Air Force. Lieutenant Junior Grade Onzi Lewis Level Jr., U.S. Navy. Gunnery Sergeant Jeffrey Edward Bohr, U.S. Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Terry Wayne Hemingway, U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Edward Emmanuel Currington, U.S. Army. Chief Warrant Officer Stephen Thomas Payton, U.S. Army. Gunnery Sergeant Jeffrey Edward Bohr, Jr., U.S. Marine Corps. Ensign Philip Andrew Bagud, U.S. Navy. Senior Airman Jonathan Paul King, U.S. Air Force. Staff Sergeant Ryan Agosto Tejeda, U.S. Marine Corps. Sergeant First Class Mary Carolyn Pryor, U.S. Army. Seaman Keith Gerard Aguilar, U.S. Navy. Petty Officer Sean Patrick McNamara, U.S. Navy. Specialist Kevin Len Hollingworth, U.S. Army. Lance Corporal David Edward Owens Jr., U.S. Marine Corps. Fireman Apprentice Shavinska Lavarco Fontenot, U.S. Navy. Corporal Jesus Angel Gonzalez, U.S. Marine Corps. Specialist Elijah Blue Nyes, U.S. Army. Sergeant Alexander Mirmovic, Maryanovich Troy Chansky, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Lee James Jenkins, U.S. Air Force. Petty Officer Keith Demps, U.S. Navy. Commander Joseph Acevedo, U.S. Navy. Specialist Gil Marcado, U.S. Army.
Private Laren Kelly Merrick, U.S. Army. Specialist Richard Allen Gower, U.S. Army National Guard. Specialist Thomas Arthur Foley III, U.S. Army. Private First Class John Eli Brown, U.S. Army. Corporal Armando Ariel Gonzalez, U.S. Marine Corps. Private First Class Joseph Patrick Mayick, U.S. Army. Corporal Jason David Melillo, U.S. Marine Corps. Corporal Federico Alvarez Aguilar, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Stephen Lamar Felton, U.S. Army. Specialist Tammy Lynn Gomez, U.S. Army. Lieutenant Colonel Albert Harvey Minion, U.S. Army. Petty Officer Ashisha Marie Rudy, U.S. Navy. Corporal John Travis Rivero, U.S. Army National Guard. Tech Sergeant Ronald Lee Madir, U.S. Air Force. Commander Michael Mayer, U.S. Navy. Lieutenant Commander Anthony Richard Domingo, U.S. Navy. Domino, U.S. Navy. Commander Richard Collins Stanborn, U.S. Navy. Lance Corporal Richard Francis Pinta III, U.S. Marine Corps. Private First Class Daniel Harrison Holdren, U.S. Marine Corps. Seaman Matthew Lynn Wood, U.S. Navy. Senior Airman Dominic Vincent Martini, U.S. Air Force. Petty Officer Deborah Denise Foy, U.S. Navy. Specialist Christopher Staten, U.S. Army. Seaman Apprentice Sean Allen Dooley, U.S. Navy. Specialist William Troy Baggett, U.S. Army. Chief Warrant Officer Robert William Chanel Jr., U.S. Marine Corps. Specialist Roy Russell Buckley, United States Reserve, Army Reserve. Lance Corporal Alan Dina Lamb, U.S. Marine Corps. Chief Warrant Officer Andrew Todd Arnold, U.S. Marine Corps. Petty Officer Michael Daniel Volkmer, U.S. Navy. Specialist Colin Joseph Grass, U.S. Army. Specialist David Brian Fedorka, U.S. Army. Sergeant Troy David Jenkins, U.S. Army. Petty Officer Christopher Dominic Sweet, U.S. Navy. Sergeant First Class Deborah Lee Johnson, U.S. Army. Private Alejandro Alexis Santos, U.S. Marine Corps. Airman First Class Raymond Linezo, U.S. Air Force. Private Jared R. Dennis, U.S. Army. First Lieutenant Osvaldo Orozco, U.S. Army. Specialist Narson Bertil Sullivan, U.S. Army. Sergeant David Michael Borchak, Jr., U.S. Army. Private First Class Casey Lynn McVeigh, U.S. Marine Corps. Master Sergeant David Michael Dowling, U.S. Air Force. Private Michael Centel Dukes, U.S. Army. Airman First Class Brian Michael Washington, U.S. Air Force. Captain Stanford Scott Sullivan, U.S. Army. Specialist Will John Scarlett, U.S. Army. Specialist Jeremy James Lovelace, U.S. Army. First Sergeant Joe Jesus Garza, U.S. Air Force, or U.S. Army. Garza, U.S. Army. Master Sergeant Jose Angel Zayas, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Devan Williamson, U.S. Army. Chief Warrant Officer John Douglas Shriller, U.S. Marine Corps. Captain Johnny Eugene Turner, U.S. Navy. Senior Chief Petty Officer Larry Green Medor, U.S. Navy. Private First Class Wilton Earl Moody, U.S. Army. Private First Class Jesse Allen Gibbons, U.S. Army. Petty Officer Jason Wayne Gordon, U.S. Navy. Petty Officer James Ray Colley, U.S. Navy. Master Sergeant Archie Troy Haynes, U.S. Army. Private Leland John Wickram, U.S. Army. Lance Corporal Jason Matthew Vaughn, U.S. Marine Corps. Petty Officer Henrife Naeem Carter, U.S. Navy. Sergeant Sean C. Reynolds, U.S. Army. Specialist Scotty Ricks, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant William Allen Sealer, U.S. Air Force. Private First Class Shane Edward Green, U.S. Army. Staff Sergeant Rick Raymond Gentiliani, U.S. Air Force. Airman First Class Barry Joseph Newman Jr., U.S. Air Force.
Sergeant First Class Kent Randy Lohman, United States Army. Major Eluse Marie Perzoli, United States Army. Private Jason L. Diebler, United States Army. Commander Norman Marshall Edwards, United States Navy. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Curry, United States Army. Captain John Drew Doty, United States Army. Lance Corporal Larry Joseph Starr, United States Marine Corps. Petty Officer Second Class Rhonda Faye Lewis, United States Navy. Sergeant Danny Ramirez, United States Army. Petty Officer First Class Demetrius Lamonte Carter, United States Navy. Petty Officer Third Class Mark Allen Jarrett, United States Navy. Private First Class Marlon T. Rockhold, United States Army. Lance Corporal Cedric E. Bruns, United States Marine Corps. Corporal Richard P. Carl, United States Army. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Hans N. Gukison, United States Army. Chief Warrant Officer 3, Brian Keith Van Dusen, United States Army. Chief Warrant Officer 2, Dusen Brian K. Van, United States Army. Specialist Joseph Maria Marquez, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Paul Carl Gibson Jr., United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Eric Ryan Hammerd, United States Army. Lance Corporal Matthew R. Smith, United States Marine Corps Reserve. Specialist Arnold Tyson Rivers, United States Army. Sergeant Anthony Vincent Lopez, United States Army. Lance Corporal Jacob Henry Kowalik, United States Marine Corps. Tech Sergeant Mark Steven Samskar, United States Air Force. Private First Class Private First Class Jose F. Gonzalez Rodriguez, United States Marine Corps. First Sergeant Angela Dismuke Ratliff, United States Army. Lance Corporal Nicholas Brian Kleeboker, United States Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Patrick Lee Griffin Jr., United States Air Force. Chief Petty Officer Gregory Fulgham, United States Navy. Sergeant David T. Nutt, United States Army. Private Jason Michael Bates, United States Army. Petty Officer First Class Dwayne Eugene Sampson II, United States Navy. Private Tony Marie Smith, United States Army. Master Sergeant William L. Payne, United States Army. Sergeant Craig Allen Crossland, United States Army. Second Lieutenant Sean Paul Asavadalo Chai, United States Air Force. Sergeant David Zong, United States Marine Corps. Private Matthew Carey Branton, United States Marine Corps. Private Amon Jacob Nielsen, United States Army. Petty Officer 3rd Class Frederick Freeman Green, United States Navy. Corporal Douglas Jose Marincorius, United States Marine Corps. Specialist Rashid Sahib, United States Army. Petty Officer 2nd Class Eric Anthony McGee, United States Navy. Staff Sergeant Byron Lloyd Brown, United States Army. Captain Andrew David Lamont, United States Marine Corps. Lance Corporal Jason William Moore, United States Marine Corps. Lieutenant Colonel Dominic Rocco Barragona, United States Army. First Lieutenant Timothy Luis Ryan, as you were. First Lieutenant Timothy Lewis Ryan, United States Marine Corps. Staff Sergeant Aaron Dean White, United States Marine Corps. Sergeant Kirk Allen Straczynski, United States Marine Corps. Airman First Class Antonio Ira Martinez, United States Air Force. Chief Master Sergeant Willie Izuma, as you were. Uzima Yates Jr., United States Air Force. Specialist Nathaniel A. Caldwell, United States Army. Lieutenant Commander Gary Wayne Prawl, United States Navy. Private Tommy Frank Cruz, United States Army. Staff Sergeant Michael Earl Cole, United States Air Force. Specialist Jason Stephen Howe, United States Army. Specialist Ryan Brent Stark, United States Army.
178 names in a month and a half. Horrible time for families here back at home. Is there anyone that would like to call out loud the name of somebody that they knew or served with? Somebody who was a friend or a relative?
Call up my crew, Mark CW1, Mark Eisenhart, Specialist Danny Gruber, Specialist Doug Compton. They're all on the same cruise.
Anyone else? If we could just take a moment of silence to just reflect on all of the names that we ran for and read tonight and the families that they represent and those other names that were called out. Bow our heads. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all. Commander,
Yeah, more food, more cake, more fruit,
thank you.
plenty of drinks up there, energy drinks and stuff for you. Take them home with you and have
Thank
tight
you.
stacks.
Commander and your team, we just really heartfelt appreciate, the opportunity to be hosted tonight and to come into a place of rest and to be able to share an emotional moment. It means the world to us. This post has been supportive for us for not just this run, but for the past 5 years as we've run through from Tucson to Phoenix every year. We're going in reverse kind of now, but appreciate the warm welcome and the open hearts and everyone involved in making this happen. And I know it's a labor of love, for you and a lot of people taking of their own time and resources. And it's very, very much appreciated. And please pass it on to anybody that may not have stayed, because it is beyond appreciated by us. And we have, and to tell you the truth, we have been, American Legions are so dear to us because every night for the last 17 nights, we are hosted by American Legions all through California and into Arizona. And I imagine we'll be hosted by American Legions all the way to Arlington. And so the Legion is very, very important to us. and is very meaningful in the success of what we do. And I hope that you're proud to know that you are helping us honor these thousands and thousands of heroes all across America. So I thank you for that. You know, it takes a lot of resources for us to get across the country. You know, hotel rooms, gasoline, it's very expensive. We don't ask for donations. We're terrible about asking for donations. But we do carry stuff with us, like T-shirts and patches and things like that. So if anybody has any interest in that, we have some of that to show you. But other than that, you know, our appreciation of you is all that, you know, and this partnership is all that we ask for.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
All right. And there's food, guys, if you want to take food with us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for everybody that helped out. I appreciate all you guys' help coming together as a team, especially to Juan for cooking the food. So if you see Juan on the way out, just thank him. The food was delicious. And my main person here was Jim. He was pivotal in getting this going along with Post 97. So if you could just give Jim a round of applause. What I do now.
That was for you, Jim. You missed it.
All right, thank you, everybody. Godspeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.